Hi, I'm Dale Sherbeck, and welcome to the HQ, a CHA Learning and Healthcare Can podcast serial where we dive into the healthcare issues and topics from the perspective of its people and discuss them with those that are leading in the health system. Together, we'll try to unpack these topics and learn what actions are being taken to innovatively solve them today. The past 2 years have surely awakened the eyes and hearts of many Canadians to the realities of growing old in our country. In the middle of it all, commissions, reviews, and finger pointing had already begun to mount about how the system failed this vulnerable population and its long-term care residents. Some people searched for easy targets, and there was vociferous debate about private versus public. There were countless calls about how we must do better. In response, many governments have made massive pledges to build more beds in facilities across the country. Yet when it comes to the construction of new facilities, the conversation is often, how many beds and where? And we hear very little in the public about the design and vision for how these facilities are going to be built. On the fringe of this, there are other discussions around aging well, aging in place, or aging at home. And organizations like Covenant Health and SE Health have challenged and inspired us to think differently about seniors and the future of aging with their Courage initiative. However, most would still agree that we have a long way to go, and that the most prominent image many Canadians might have of long-term care facilities is one of long corridors, institutional colors and doors, hospital beds, and locked wings, so that people can't escape their, quote, homes. And indeed, some might argue that this, in particular, and our collective inability to effectively care for those with dementia, was what is at the heart of Doug Ford's previous declaration to end so-called hallway medicine. Other organizations, however, have taken to confront this stereotype and put the home back in healthcare and find more effective ways to treat our seniors, and especially those with dementia, and treat them all with care and dignity. One such leading organization is the Regional Municipality of Peel. And for our listeners across the country, Peel is located in the western part of the Greater Toronto Area and is home to approximately 1.5 million residents in the cities of Brampton, Mississauga, and the town of Caledon. Peel services touch the lives of residents every day across a very diverse population. In fact, the top 5 languages spoken in Peel are English, Punjabi, Urdu, Mandarin, Arabic, and Polish. And some of you may better know the region as home to Canada's greatest and busiest airport, Pearson International. As part of the services offered to its communities, the region of Peel owns and operates 5 long-term care homes serving 700 residents and their families. The evolution of long-term care services in the region is evident in the development of a seniors' health and wellness village, which, through the implementation of the butterfly model of care in all 5 of its homes, will be a center of excellence in dementia care. To discuss the butterfly model of care, I'm joined today from the region of Peel by 2 remarkable leaders, Anne-Marie Case-Volkert, who is the Interim Director of Long-Term Care in the Health Services Department of the region of Peel, overseeing the region's 5 homes and its 1,100 staff. She has over 20 years of progressive leadership and healthcare experience in long-term care, acute and community care, and regulatory compliance. And I'm also joined by Monica Goodban, who has been working with the people living in long-term care homes since 1994. Her work with the region of Peel focuses on leading the implementation of emotion-based care approaches, such as the butterfly model of care, in the region's homes. She is passionate about ensuring that those living with dementia have vibrant, connected, and emotionally well lives. Hi, Anne-Marie and Monica, and welcome to the HQ.
Hi, Dale. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, Dale, for having us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's a great honor to have both of you here joining us today. I mean, we've heard so much about how long-term care in the sector overall has been really challenged by our current pandemic and those who are working within it. So how have you guys been through all of this?
Well, I can start, Dale. I think it's certainly been a challenging time. Everyone has been impacted by COVID, personally, professionally, in our work lives, and people who we work most closely with, our vulnerable population and seniors. We've seen incredible loss, as well as we've seen in the sector, as well as great wins, a lot of creativity and innovation. I think in terms of, how have we been managing through this, it's really, I work with an incredible team of people at various levels within long-term care and throughout the region. There really has been a great deal of collaboration and support amongst our teams, for our families, for our residents, and really banding together to collectively manage through this, because it's not over. We're still very much in the state of a pandemic, and so it's been really a collective team effort, and leaning on each other.
That's really great to hear. And it's, yeah, I think as much as you've described, it has been an opportunity for so much innovation and creativity through all of this, but it certainly has required a lot of resilience on the part of everybody in it. So great to see you both here, and thank you for taking time out of all of that challenge and stress to talk about some of your own innovations. So maybe, Monica, could we start with sort of the preamble? We talked a little bit about the butterfly model. So what is it to be a butterfly, and maybe help our listeners understand that word in this context?
So the term butterfly is one that's used by Meaningful Care Matters, which is the organization that owns the butterfly approach model of care, and with whom we are accredited. Really being a butterfly and adopting the butterfly approach is to look at a style of living, working and interacting with people in congregate care settings that recreates an environment that's more similar to a home and less like an institution. Being a butterfly means that all team members that we work with focus on being with people rather than doing for, understanding that it's those moment-to-moment connections with individuals that mean more to them than doing things for them, or the support that the support that we provide to them. Being a butterfly means it's adapting the environment and our approaches to the current skill level of the people that we care for. So understanding the changing needs of a person living with dementia and how to adjust based on those needs, and accepting them for where they're at in their journey and their current skills. It's about having connections with people that are genuine, that have that mutual benefit. It's giving and receiving affection. It's seeing the joy on someone's face when they hug you or they tell you that they love you as they're playing with your hair. It's about understanding the importance of the vibrant lived experience of people that we care for, knowing about family, religious affiliation, hobbies, occupations, interests, all that good stuff that makes a person who they are. It's about knowing about that so we can connect with people in ways that are meaningful to them.
Oh, yeah, it does sound like good stuff. It's very beautiful. So maybe you could describe a little bit about what that philosophy is in a bit more detail about, what is emotion-focused care or emotion-based care as it relates to this?
It's an interesting philosophy in that it is one that's rooted in compassionate approaches to care. So rather than the kind of traditional model of care where we expect people to join us on our task-based journey or our task-based day-to-day focus, we shift our approach and we join them on their journey instead of trying to pull them into our reality. And it really underscores that kind of concept or the saying that reminds people in long-term care that we're working in their homes. They don't live where we work. It's the other way around. So it's embracing that philosophy that this is the person's home and we're approaching what we do in ways that are compassionate and meaningful to them. Emotion-based care is also really focused on opportunities to enable freedom for people living with dementia and for people living in our homes. And through a lens of freedom, we look at perceived risk and elements of risk and how can we mitigate those risks. So how do we adapt our approach in order to enable that freedom for people living with us?
So is it, I asked the question because we ourselves, offer education in the area of people-centered care or person-centered care. So is it the same thing, or is it a bit different in terms of, how you're, operating it, or how it exists within long-term care?
I took a few beats to think about this, Dale, because I was really trying to determine, is it different? Is it that different, person-centered care versus emotion-based care? And I think it is nuanced in some subtle difference. Person-centered care is one where we know that the person is at the center of everything we do, But I think person-centered care could still skew towards the institutionalized practices and approaches in long-term care. Where it differs is that emotion-based care really hones in on the individual, valuing the input of the individual, their preferences, their lived history, and recreating spaces that are home-like, familiar, comforting, and filled with the stuff of life instead of the stuff of institutional congregate living.
So it sounds a little bit like it's about creating, I guess, experiences then as much for the people who you're working with. Is that would sort of be consistent with that, or?
Yes, yeah. It's about creating that environment that looks, smells, and feels like home.
Like home, yeah, that's nice. And home is a place that we're all finding ourselves sort of needing to sort of redefine in our own lives a little bit as things come together. So when I was doing a little bit of reading as well, what I was sort of coming across is that you focus a little bit more on, I guess, on those outcomes versus, I guess, as sometimes in our healthcare sort of system, we talk about tasks and things being performed. Sort of, does that again build on a little bit of what you've just been talking about?
Yes, yeah. So we know that to operate a long-term care home, we still are going to have tasks that need to be accomplished to make sure that people are kept safe and well while they're living with us. But the approach of emotion-based care is one where the connection is elevated above the task. So when we are looking at opportunities to connect with people and to focus on people, it is how do we elevate that experience? We care for people. They're not a tick box. They're not something to check off a list or something to do. And care shouldn't be silent. And it also shouldn't occur only when people are only ready for it to happen. So we need to have that flexibility and in people's preferences and, moments in that day. So it really is about, being able to adapt what we do on a day-to-day, being able to adapt our schedules so that we can still do those tasks, but we're doing it with a lens of the person first. What is it that they need, and how are we connecting with them while we're doing a task? So an example is, supporting somebody to bathe. Bathing and showering can be a very distressing experience for a person living with dementia. And how do we support somebody through that experience? What things do we put in place? How do we approach them? What do we talk to them about? How do we set the stage for preparing them for going to have a bath? What props might we use? How do we bring them comfort during that experience? So it really is about all of those things put together that elevates that experience for them above simply having a bath.
Yeah, so I think the word that I heard you repeat over and over again, I guess, is the how we do things, as opposed to the what we do. So
that's correct. Yeah.
Great. So maybe, Anne-Marie, could you describe a little bit about what this looks like or how it looks different in terms of the way a long-term care home or organization is sort of organized or set up?
When we're thinking about a traditional long-term care home and how so it's really the observations of seeing the difference in how care is delivered. When you come into a home with a butterfly model philosophy within that household, you actually feel it, you sense it, you smell the cooking, you see the engagement of residents in various, small group activities, or could be individual activities as well. Historically, in long-term care, when you think about a traditional home, there are scheduled programs. So I'm going to just focus in on programming, for example. The old legislation really required that programming was done at set scheduled times. So you had to have day programs, and you had to have one in the evening, one on the weekend, etc. So that outside of those programs, what are residents doing? Oftentimes you'd see them around a television. They're not watching the television. They're not able to engage with whatever the programming is. And you didn't see a lot of activity or meaningful engagement with the residents. So really the difference is if you were to, walk into a emotion-based care model, in a home that's operating in under that philosophy, you should be seeing residents engaged in various different activities. It's not necessarily that large group bingo going on because everybody's not can't either doesn't have the capacity to play bingo, not interested, but that's the only activity that's happening at that time. This requires, in order to be person-centered, you actually need to know that this individual actually likes to read, or this person likes to, engage with different types of puzzles or crafts or things like that. So you should see multiple. Person-centered means that you'll see a variety of things happening at the same time. Or you could have everybody who is interested in the same group activity, but everybody should be engaged to the capacity that they can be engaged in. So that's an example. When you think about traditional long-term care, another area of difference is in the dining, a significant area in the dining and what dining looks like. So normally in a traditional home, you would see, and certainly you'll see this in our homes in non-butterfly areas. So I do want to mention that. So you will see the setup of, smaller tables, smaller, maybe 3 or 4 residents around a table who are being served their meals, a bit like a restaurant type style where they take their order and then bring them their meal, versus in an emotion based in our butterfly model households, you'll see a very much like home, where you would see a big table in the center of the dining room, and all of the residents around the table, family, what we call family style dining, where the food is in the middle of the table, and ability to help with serving. The meal is there, it's front and center. It's very difficult. You can understand the challenges taking for residents who are diagnosed with dementia or have some level of cognitive impairment, which is a number of vast majority of residents actually in long-term care. Ordering off of a menu style iPad, whether it's electronic or we have what was called show plates, still difficult to understand and comprehend what you want to eat. This way you're smelling, you're participating, they're engaging in the experience. So it's those kinds of things. Even how you deliver medication looks a little bit different, trying to move away from traditional med carts, institutional type med carts into, they're still med carts, so we're not quite there yet. We haven't gone that all the way to where we'd like to go with it, but it really designing them or having them decorated in a manner that, for that household, that would be conducive for that household, so that it doesn't look like the big medication cart coming through. Even looking at, how do we manage those tasks in order to make sure, because as Monica mentioned earlier, these are things we are still responsible for the clinical care. So all of that is still happening. It's about how we go about doing that and how we work with individuals in their various capacities to deliver that type of care.
Yeah, well, you paint a good picture for me, and at least I guess what I sort of am taking away from this is that it's less about programming life and more creating spaces for life to happen. And I do like the idea of putting a plate in front of or dishes in front of people, and they can take what they want because they can see it, they can identify that that's mashed potatoes or beans or whatever it is that they're looking for. So this is a big change, I think, for many organizations to contemplate, I'm sure, especially if they've been, delivering, resident care in a different model or a more traditional sort of model. So how do you implement this in an organization, or how did you implement this within the region of Peel and your different homes that you operate? And how do you get people to buy into this?
This is a significant change. It's a culture change, and it takes time and quite a bit of effort. I do want to say that whether you're implementing this in another organization or how we went about it for us at the region of Peel, certainly required commitment from all levels of people. It required all levels from our most senior leadership, our council, our frontline leadership, our staff, engaging our unions. So really engaging all the stakeholders and having commitment across the level, across the board. But you also require to really having a sense of needing to understand where you are at right now and a discomfort with the current state
Mhm.
and a vision for where you want to go. I think it's important, certainly for us. Our homes, do perform well. We have great teams that are providing care and services. So that was already happening at the time. But when you know that there is more that you can do to foster more of a person-centered, more of an emotion-based care, more evolve and really engage people living in the home in a different manner that could also lead to a better quality of life, then that's the catalyst. You need a catalyst to have that catalyst for change. I think in terms of, for us, that we've always been at the region invested in improving quality and being innovative. And so having some courage, for us, we were early adopters first in Ontario to go through with this, and it does require some courage to step out there and try something different when you know that your vision is to evolve and enhance the quality of life for people that we're serving. So that was really important for us. And we've always been looking to implement best practices and evidence-informed care. So that's always been underpinning for us as an organization. I think when we're looking at also the implementation piece, you do want to integrate. We've talked a lot, and Monica's talked a lot, you've mentioned it as well, Dale, about the model being how we do things. So in order to do that, it has to be integrated throughout our care and services. So it can't be seen as additional workload. We need to, and certainly we continue to work on integrating it into our policies, ensuring that it aligns with our overall strategic vision. It is a priority for us as an organization. Senior services is one of our term of council priorities, and expanding that, providing services across the continuum of care for seniors. And so it aligns well with the vision. It aligns well with our strategic direction. And certainly really engaging our stakeholders every step of the way is important. That ongoing communication, building that awareness. It hasn't been smooth and easy. We
Yeah.
certainly it comes with, when you're seeing a change with culture, you know that it takes time, and you know that there are going to be hills and valleys, but I think we certainly have had the endorsement and the support across the region. I would also say, when Monica mentioned this a bit earlier, that we did engage with Meaningful Care Matters to support us with that implementation as well. And then, as part of our ongoing change and effort and commitment to quality, we are monitoring and evaluating as we go along, sharing those results with our stakeholders, and it really helps to keep everyone motivated. We know for our staff, seeing tangible change brings that intrinsic reward. And so we've heard, positive things from our staff in terms of working in the households, and just the reward of seeing the difference and the change in the people they're caring for becoming more engaged and more alive is almost some of the words. And Monica can speak to stories around that, but we've definitely, it's seeing the change helps to also buy in to the change and to sustain it.
Yeah. So maybe we can go there next then, in terms of, what is the change that you do see, Monica? I mean, how does it make a difference in the lives of these residents?
So from the perspective of people that are living on the home areas, what we see more of, excuse me, what we see more of is people having choice in their day to day. And that could be choice from something as simple as, what time am I choosing to wake up and get out of bed this morning? Do I want breakfast today, or do I maybe want something a little bit later and have a bigger lunch?
Mhm.
So it's those elements of choice. It's also the elements of freedom, freedom of movement, freedom to express themselves, freedom to access the outdoors when they want to access the outdoors. And it's the ability of staff to support that freedom that people have when they're living in our home areas. We have a lovely, lovely person that lives with us at one of our homes, and she is the epitome of freedom. When you think about what does freedom mean on a butterfly home area, and she is an avid walker and climber and crawler. And she just has the absolute freedom to perch herself on the end of a table and to sit and to look around, or to walk in and out of the home area, around the home area. And instead of, in the past, we may have tried to limit her ability to perch herself on a table or crawl on the ground. We would have wanted to naturally stop that. She is just able to do that, and we've adapted our approach instead. And we may go and stand beside her and coax her down in a friendly way, but she has the ultimate example of freedom on the home area. So I think that's a huge difference for people that we are caring for that are living with dementia. The other thing that when I think about the value of the model and emotion-based care model, and certainly the butterfly approach, is that we really are honing in on the individual. So we're filling the home with elements that are familiar to them. So instead of in a kind of traditional care setting where there may be generic artwork or generic pieces of art, we have people's wedding photos, we have travel adventures, we have the stuff of life throughout the home area, creating those familiar spaces and abilities to connect back to memories. So we really are seeing a lot of positive well-being for people that are living in the home areas. For staff, it's about having that ability and the autonomy to adjust their day and their routine based on the people that they care for. And this was a biggie. When we talk about culture change, we can talk about culture change on a macro and a micro level, right? At a micro level, it's giving people who have been I don't want to say conditioned, but for lack of a better word, conditioned to work in a task focused approach, giving them the permission to change how they do things in order to best suit the needs or meet the needs of the person they're caring for in that moment. So I think we have a staffing population that are engaged, they're excited about what they do. And I've had people in training and during implementation that have said to me, finally, I've always wanted to do something like this, and I just feel like this is the right thing to do. So we see the positive effects among residents, families, and staff alike.
Yeah, that's a great sort of anecdote and metric in terms of how you're succeeding in that space. So, I mean, at the heart of a lot of what you've been describing is a need to teach or build, I guess, emotional intelligence in your staff and caregivers. I mean, I guess, is that the same as teaching someone to be empathetic? And ultimately, how do you go about changing the way people feel in terms of their work?
I think it's a yes and a no for whether it's the same. To successfully implement the model, what we've had to look at is where the staff's understanding or baseline understanding of emotional intelligence is, and how do we support them to learn about emotional intelligence. Through the training, we've looked to the work of Daniel Goleman to help teach our team members about fight or flight instincts and to understand people's response to perceived threats. And connecting those back to our approaches. So if we approach somebody in a way that they're perceiving as a threat, what's their response to us going to be? Are they going to fight, or are they going to fly? We also use his teachings to help staff understand about the domains of emotional intelligence from the perspective of themselves. So we'll focus on the self-awareness domain. How do we feel in certain reactions? How do we name those feelings and describe what we're feeling in those moments? What is it that triggers those emotions in us, and how do we react? And then we look to that self-regulation domain. What do we do? Do we fight? Do we fly? And all of those, all of that information together helps us to understand our own emotional response in any given setting, and is tremendously value in the care environment. As you know, there are moments where there are difficult situations that team members have to navigate, and really tapping into that self-awareness of, this is how I'm feeling in the moment, and how am I going to regulate that emotion, is tremendously important. From an empathy perspective, we really, really focus in on that concept of the golden rule. If this were me, if this were my loved one, if this
Mhm.
were my mother, what kind of care would I expect them to receive? And would I be okay with the care that I am providing to them? So using that golden rule to build that level of empathy and understanding, and the interactions and the responsibility that they have for the care that they provide to the people that are living with us.
Yeah, I think it's profound in that respect. And I mean, I would think that all element or other parts of our healthcare system would benefit from some of those same sort of introspective sort of learnings and opportunities to sort of reflect on our own values, our emotions, and what we're bringing to our interactions with other people always.
Mhm.
So I would be another follow-up conversation, perhaps, to better understand how do you teach that in fact, and help people to sort of get to that space.
You know, there's a great movie that I don't know if you're aware of, or if you've seen it. It was called Inside Out, and
Yes.
it's an animated movie that depicts 5 emotions that a
Mhm.
young child has. And I've used that in training before to illustrate all the different emotions that can run through our minds at any point during the day, and where we create those core memories and those core moments. That's a really great tool to illustrate to staff the importance and the power of our emotions in our day-to-day lives, and our reactions to one another or situations that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, well, it's a brilliant movie, and I certainly used it with my own son to better help him understand his emotions. But yeah, I can see for sure about how you could use that in our own sort of adult life, as well, as we try to later in life come back to understand why we feel and do the things that we do. So maybe sort of just switching gears a little bit, Anne-Marie, and talking about uh, this last 2.5 years, this pandemic and COVID, and what does that do to all the good work that you've been investing in, and the challenges that may come with that. I can only imagine that when you have all these uh, personal touches of home that are in a space, and we have all these concerns around infection prevention, control, and other aspects of life, and this whole command and control side of cycle, what does that do to the home that you're trying to build?
A great question, Dale. Definitely, we have been impacted by COVID, both in COVID has challenged us, and has also offered forced us really to become more creative with this. When we're looking at the impact of COVID, it has impacted us also. It's evolved from wave 1 to where we are right now in wave 6. We've seen an evolution of the restrictions, in terms of what the infection prevention and control measures have been. In long-term care specifically was very hard hit in terms of, certainly closing of long-term care homes, significant periods of isolation for people living in long-term care. It not allowing visitors in. So these are the things that in the earlier waves, this was the method that was really put upon long-term care in order to really try to mitigate. We did see incredible loss in the sector of lives, seniors living in long-term care. And so that was the reaction to it. However, as we've navigated through this, and the journeying through this, we've seen that it really, there's ways to manage this. So when we look at the butterfly model, of course, it has impacted our continued efforts to implement this model in some of our other homes where we hadn't quite got to. Had great plans, and then COVID happened, and I think that's a lot of people could say that in terms of the past. Now
Mhm.
we're in the third year of this. It has, so when we look at it, so I'll give examples. So when it comes to isolating, the isolation of residents, these are still measures that have to come into place if someone is exposed or maybe becomes positive. And so what does that look like? So having the emotion-based lens requires us to think about how do we continue that engagement using different strategies. So some of that is having kits that are really customized for the things that when Monica talks about the stuff of life that are meaningful to
Mhm.
that individual, and bringing that to them, and staff knowing what that is and knowing what their routines are, and engaging them in that way in a one-on-one type of a situation, which is kind of similar to what we would have done if they weren't in isolation. So doing those kinds of things, but certainly we don't have the shared items that we would have had, all of the things that everyone could just pick up and touch and move and whatnot.
Yeah.
Obviously, we wouldn't be able to continue with that, but really looking at more individualization in that. Lots of cleaning, lots of disinfection, it does require additional resources. And certainly in terms of being able to, if you have an individual who is walking, it likes to walk and go through the home area, then how do we support that individual to do that safely? So there's a lot of cleaning and a lot of disinfection going on, but it also means that you need to know, we're still doing the same pieces of getting to know who these individuals are, engaging their families. We've had to be innovative. So when the restrictions came in terms of closure, what it also felt like closure to the outside, it certainly wasn't closed on the inside. We were delivering care and services using technology. So virtual visits and iPads, and so that people could stay engaged with their loved ones. There was, we had window visits where we could, and things like that, to really make sure that regular communication is so important and that connection is so important. But you can imagine how challenging it is for a person with dementia having to connect through technology. So it really was really difficult, and continues to be. It does cause great creativity. As I said, I think we've had regular communications through setting up a family line, for example, so that they could get the general messaging and know what's going on in the home in a way, but also have a repository to access online of information that was happening, so that we can keep those lines of communication open. Town halls, lots of town halls with families, with residents, with staff, to keep people engaged and aware of what's happening, and a forum for questions and things like that. So there's been a lot of innovative models, or innovative strategies that we've utilized that will continue. So that are lessons learned as well. There are those as well, in terms of we're hoping that we don't ever go back to the way it was in wave one, in terms of the requirements and the restrictions that came down from the province, and that there's learning that we can do this another way and still mitigate the risks, through screening, through different avenues to try and still allow the outside in, and allowing our residents also to go out and engage with the community where they're able to. Monica, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
Yeah, I just, I think often about how the pandemic kind of inadvertently shined that spotlight on the importance of emotional well-being, and isolation, and the impact that isolation from people and things and stuff and activities has on an individual, especially an individual living with dementia. So it really does require us to think from the perspective of both clinical wellness and emotional wellness. That yes, we do have all of these restrictions that we need to be mindful of to keep people physically well, but how can we also keep people physically well and emotionally well at the same time? So to Anne-Marie's point, it did require a lot of creativity, and thinking about outside of the box. How can we do this, and how can we make sure that people aren't suffering the way that we saw people suffer in the first waves when there was complete shutdowns in long-term care?
Yeah, I think as you both described that, I mean, what I'm sort of, I guess, struck by is that you're managing a situation in a healthcare environment that's not so dissimilar to the way we all managed it in our own homes. And I guess, right, that we, people have had, family members coming through with COVID, people outside managing their bubbles, managing the spaces, disinfecting, right, all of that, while trying to still manage our own mental wellness and that of our families and circles. But what I hear when you describe it, it's doing similar things, which I don't think we often hear about in healthcare. That you are managing that as in a residential setting, really, in some respects. I mean, there are clinical aspects that sort of overwrap all of that, but and I think a lot of what you've been talking about here in our conversation also emphasizes for me, the distinction that I had to learn, I don't know, 15 years ago, about the difference between a patient and a resident, and why that language was so critical to those that work within long-term care. And yet, while many people sort of keep using that language, I don't know that they necessarily live it the way that you've been describing it. And I think your example, I guess, is about how you strive and navigate through COVID really emphasizes for me the emphasis on the home part of it. So.
Mm-hmm. And we even take it a step further now, Dale, from patient to resident to person. The
Yes.
people that we live that live with us, or people that visit with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a multifaceted approach that looks at stigmatizing language, and how do we care plan, and what do we language do we use in care plan, and how do we balance legislative requirements with being a home. So it is one of those models and approaches that is constantly evolving.
Yeah, language matters, right?
Language does matter.
Yeah, it changes how we organize and construct the world around us. So, so maybe as a way to sort of close this up a little bit, but I mean, I'm inspired by the work that you're doing, and when I saw pictures of the butterfly model in place, and I saw photos of the doorways entering into the different parts of a home, that look like beautiful doors that I wish I had on my front door, right? But it looks like a home's front door for those that can't see in this podcast. But how do you inspire others to do this? How do you spread this from the 5 homes that you're operating in the region of Peel to, every home in Ontario and across Canada? I mean, how does this, what's stopping us from doing it? Does an administrator just listen to this this episode and say, wow, I want to do this, and just do it? Or is there a process? So maybe not a step-by-step guide, but what are your lessons in terms of going forward for others that might want to follow in your footsteps?
Thank you for that question, Dale. It's certainly our desire to see this in all homes across Ontario, and it's certainly, there's been a lot of advocacy that we continue to do in terms of really advocating with our system partners to our system partners to really see the value in this model of care and put some resources behind it. When we think about scaling this to other homes in a really robust, comprehensive manner, actually requires system supports, really a commitment at the provincial level to support emotion-based care through funding, through resources, embedding this into, there has been some mention of emotion-based care in the new Fixing Long-Term Care Act, so I do want to acknowledge that. But going a step further in terms of the resources required to support implementing the model in a comprehensive manner, to support the training that Monica referred to a bit earlier. And this is a robust training program that's required in order to build the knowledge set of the staff within the homes and the leadership teams. Also looking at, I know we were just coming out with new regulations, but certainly giving more attention to it in the legislation as well, which then would support the compliance process. So when we're a heavily regulated industry that are subject to inspections and whatnot. So having ministry inspectors actually looking for this within the homes to support sustainability and enforce that it's actually happening. I mean, that's not the way that we need to have to make a move, is to do it through the compliance system, but this compliance system is already there and it's not going anywhere. I think having having support from the ministry from a policy perspective, to guide and support that implementation, and really just setting that expectation that this is what we look at the Bill of Rights for residents and making sure that this is the type of care that they have a right to receive. In terms of our work, we certainly have been open, we were open, very open prior to COVID, and we are, opening back up. We've had lots of organizations come through and tour. We certainly work with other organizations who are looking to implement and certainly have. There is a base that's growing, so it is starting to grow and spread, and so we collectively collaborate together to join forces to share lessons learned so that we all can grow in this together. This is not just about our 5 regional homes. This is about delivering care in a way that people deserve to be cared for. And so it's bigger than us. So really working alongside our system partners is an important element of this. To that second part of your question around, could an administrator just listen to this and decide to implement this? I think that's where it has to start with somebody. And why not an administrator? And certainly we talked a bit earlier about steps in terms of engaging, if there's senior leadership as part of the organization, and engaging your relevant stakeholders in the process, in the journey, so that they can get a sense of it and working towards that. So it is possible. Other organizations are doing it. So it really, we would like, the province to come alongside with us. So that's what we're still advocating for, and from the funding perspective. But certainly it is something that we began this journey with the endorsement of our regional council, and others have as well, whether it be municipal or other homes in the sector. So it can be done in the meantime. We don't need to wait, is what I would say.
Yeah, it is, like I said, over and over again, it is so inspiring to sort of see, and maybe maybe as a follow-up to this, you can share an email or our web address that I can share as part of the podcast, so that others can sort of connect or learn more, see more about the work that you've been doing. It is, a different model, really, I think is what you're describing. And I appreciate, honestly have been saying, it does require more resources, but it does seem like this is something that those that, have to live and work in long-term care deserve, quite frankly. And that anything less that just makes it easier for us to deliver services to them, I think, is doing a disservice to the people that are there. And that we shouldn't have to, as individuals, as family members, or as people ourselves, right, have to sort of fear that someday we will end up in long-term care. And I think, coming back to your discussion earlier, Monica, right, about the golden rule, right? So we should create a space that would be good enough for us, what we would expect, for sure. So thank you so much for the work that you've done, continue to do, and for sharing your story with us here in this episode. So any further comments yourself before we close off?
I just wanted to say thank you, Dale, for this opportunity, and for all your thoughtful insight in terms of coming and understanding and interest in just the curiosity in what we are doing. And we're quite passionate about it, and certainly appreciate the interest and the opportunity to share this with others. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And I think you're both a testament to the fact, as we would often sort of say and teach in some of our other programs, right, that it all starts with great leadership. So thank you both for being those leaders and for making a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Dale.
You've been listening to the HQ, and I'm Dale Sherbeck, your host. You can find this and other future episodes on the CHA Learning website, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. We'd love to hear what you think, so please follow us on our other social media channels. Thanks for joining us in this discussion today. Please join us next time.